As I am very excited for the upcoming release of Remnant 2, I have decided to play the prequel to the series, Chronos Before the Ashes. This game was marketed mainly for VR, but it can also be played as a more traditional third-person Souls-like. The game is relatively short, but since I played it on the hardest difficulty, it took me around 9 hours. There are some interesting mechanics we need to know about Chronos before we get into the run. Number 1, when you die, you're aged by an entire year. You start out as an 18-year-old and could go all the way up to age 80. As you get older, your character ages visually and your affinity to magic is increased. To make things easy, younger you means cheaper strength and agility points. Older you means cheaper arcane and magic points. Number 2, there are very few heals given to the player, ending the run with only 4. On top of this, you're not given your heals back unless you die. Resting does not reset them, making it really easy to get killed. Number 3, dying is actually a pretty important part of the game because every 10 years or so you gain access to one of 3 abilities. One of these made weapon upgrade materials drop more often, which allowed me to max out 2 weapons with ease. So while you don't want to die, it's not really horrible if it happens. And when you reach the max age, you don't die or anything, so that's pretty good. Alright, now that we understand a bit more about the game, let's get into my first experience with Chronos Before the Ashes. We select male as our gender and grab the sword for our weapon. I didn't think this game would be that challenging, so I opted for the heroic difficulty, the purest form of the game according to the prompt. We get a lecture from Grandma, which is summed up with "Dragon bad, go kill it." After sailing the waters in our rowboat, we eventually stumble upon Ward 3. For those of you who played Remnant from the Ashes, you should be somewhat familiar with these. They're lab sites or bunkers where scientists did experiments. They remain mostly empty now, of course. After disabling the emergency lockdown, I head back outside to turn on the red crystal, a shiny runic rock which serves as both my checkpoint and my teleporter. This took me to a stone city where I met some goblin creatures and found my first dragon stone, the one and only healing item we get for now. As I was trying to get used to the combat and seeing as this was on hard mode, it didn't take me long to reach age 20, granting myself the hard-earned wisdom trait, increasing how much experience we gain on this journey. And looking back, this was a great choice, as you get your health back when leveling up. Soon, we meet our first friendly NPC, the blacksmith. He's not really close to a checkpoint, but also not too bad to reach. "I've come to kill the dragon." What an epic thing to say to a blacksmith.
"Destroy the dragon. 'Tis a fool's errand, especially in the wake of the woeful encounter between the king and the Cyclops. You may as well throw yourself upon your blade."
Well, the blacksmith doesn't seem to be very hopeful about this. With my path somewhat more clear, I head on into a large room enveloped by a small tree. Said tree also appears to be alive, however, as I'm taken captive soon after. This tree offers me great power, or more accurately, he forces me to take his power. This grants us the first Dragon Stone, some magical abilities which are currently buffing our weapon with fire. This occurs after a successful dodge, parry, or heavy attack. Up in the elevator, we find this cool-looking dude who I assumed was the Cyclops. And after not opening the gate fast enough, I could say yes, it's definitely the Cyclops. Back in the room, this behemoth actually tries to squish himself through the tiny door to get at me. Pretty terrifying if you aren't ready for it. Past a few enemies, I did get another dragon heart to heal with, which is nice. I got stuck halfway through this area as I needed to attach a lever to a crank, but it would not work. Turns out this game has a combined feature where you can throw 2 items together to create useful tools, like a metal handle and a metal shaft. Fun idea, but caused me several moments of turning in circles confused. Through the gate, I find myself in front of a portal. On the top are runes I called Dumbbell A and V, or other people like to say HAV because, it actually makes sense. I wrote these down as they would be important for getting back here later. On the other side, I find a main hub portal, allowing me to input different rune combinations and travel around the world. But right now, I'm missing some of the rune blocks, so we must continue on. A few rooms over is this cabinet. Peering inside, we see another portal, but it's really, really small. Like, much smaller than the ones we've seen so far. As there seems to be a key here as well, I assume this is a future target. I wrote down the runes down arrow, 1, and backwards C. Those ones seemed a bit more straightforward. Walking up to this water fountain area, I grabbed this circular disc. It's a part channel used to split water into different directions. Taking this back over to the Cyclops where we were earlier, we place this into another stone structure, which causes water to spill out into the channel. This water allows a bridge to float up and grant me access to a secret door. This orange crystal can be used to open up massive skull-shaped doors. This one is already open, and inside is some skeletal dragons, but more importantly, the hammer. Of course, I switched to this immediately as it felt pretty hefty, and the heavy attack on it definitely hits much harder than the sword. After going back to grab that orange crystal, I found the room with the mini portal once more. Near here is a skeleton door I can now open. With my hammer putting in some good work, I find the first missing rune, an arrow, which means we can get into that cabinet. On my way back, the Cyclops did try to snatch me, which was scary, but honestly super cool at the same time. With the arrow rune inserted, we enter the correct runic combination and head through the portal. Once through, I find myself in the cabinet, and turns out I'm itty bitty, much smaller than the books I once towered over. In here, there are these wind-up toys that come at me with wooden swords. They don't stand a chance against my hammer, of course. After descending to the lower level of the bookcase and being a little worried that I'd have to fight a giant, I find the key. And instead of the key shrinking, I have to actually knock it over the edge. Causes me another walk back, but definitely more realistic than the alternative. Oh, when you see that glowing item I just walked by, remember that for later. It kinda sucks that I missed this right here, but don't worry, I'll be back. After heading all the way around to grab the key, I gain access to pretty much every door locked up until now. It's a pretty convenient key to have. Behind one such door was a locket belonging to the princess we learned about from the blacksmith. She's, well, dead now, along with her sisters. Apparently the king tried giving the other girls to him instead of her, and he purged them from existence, if you know what I mean. Never learned exactly how the princess died, but yeah, she's gone. Oh, and the final rune I was missing is in here too. The C with a mark in it. Another secret room had the sunstone in it. This one makes my weapon glow yellow and is supposed to protect me more in combat. Remember the room with the massive Cyclops boss? Well, there's actually a massive portal behind him. The runes on it were AVC. Entering them into the dial allows me to this time become much larger. So instead of fighting a massive boss, I make myself bigger and it turns into a fair fight. I use the hammer against this guy because it's what I upgraded the most so far, and using its heavy attack takes large chunks of his health away. He hits pretty darn hard, but with such a massive club he also attacks quite slow, which made dodging at the last second for a nice counter pretty easy. I died 2 times here before I decided to back up when he unleashes his 3-hit combo. Then it was just a matter of having enough patience. This was by far one of the coolest bosses I'd ever fought in a game, just because of how you work towards him and grow to take him down. There were a lot of puzzles involved that led to this epic showdown. With one of the Guardians down, the tree shows up to tell me I'm doing a good job. Now with the key that unlocks everything, we open a new door to a more underground area. Here, we fight some spear guys who are really slow, but they block everything except a heavy attack. After making my way to these 2 statues of the Pan and Krell, I noticed there was a weapon missing on the Pan's side. Maybe I can find it. And find it, I did. Here on the wall was a tilted torch. With my OCD kicking in, I promptly fixed it, and voila, the Krell axe. Probably the only weapon I never tried out, but I heard it's pretty good. The large shield was laying on the wall, so I grabbed it and boom, better shield. Honestly surprised I didn't miss this considering how the rest of the run goes. Back behind this annoying hammer guy was a small puzzle. It had the horns, face, and body of a Pan warrior. What you need to do here is take a close look at the statue from earlier. Match the dials with that statue and it will open. I had to go back a few times because I didn't see you could rotate all 3 dials, but eventually I got it. After hammering it a few times, of course, because that's always worked on my car. This gains me a sword, and I bet you can guess what we do with it. Place it on the stand in front of the statue and it opens up a staircase. And here we find the stone golem. This is the makeshift golem that the blacksmith said the Krell created. He wants the orb powering this guy, so we need to take him down. I did have a bit of trouble here. You see, the room is extremely small, and the golem takes up about 80% of it. When I'm not completely blind from him or the wall in my way, his attacks come at you pretty aggressively. You get numerous windows to attack, but in the second phase, he uses his right arm as a club, and I had a lot of trouble reading it. After about 3 deaths, I reached age 30, which allowed me to unlock Untouchable, increasing my evade window. Since that's what I was having issues with here anyway, I figured it would be the best thing to have. And after about 7 deaths, it finally did help me come out on top. Past this guy were a few enemies, and that's about it. We came here for this rolled up piece of artwork, which appears to belong to a larger piece of work. Back outside the other direction, I did indeed find a large painting that had been vandalized. I promptly rectified the situation and was thanked by an assassin attacking me. Not cool, man. This painting appears to be a bridge to a different world, and it looks really cool with how they decided to transition this. Once through into the world I assume is Yeisha, we run into a massive problem. The enemies here are agile and tough. After 3 or 4 deaths, I was not too optimistic. So, with the orb still in hand, I headed back to the blacksmith to see what he had for me. I'm rewarded with a ball and chain type mace, a flail that retracts when out of action. It was definitely a pretty fast weapon, but since my hammer was already 2 levels ahead, the damage was too poor to switch into something else. The jungle is unfortunately the most drawn out area in Chronos. It's definitely cool looking, design-wise, with rope bridges scattered among large trees and massive ziggurat structures. But the enemies can be challenging and they throw more than one agile gazelle at you from time to time. Once finally at a new checkpoint, I found a few different things. First off, we gain a new dragon power, which is essentially lightning, making me Thor, the god of thunder. We then find a spear, which I promptly switched to because the reach, my man. This thing is extremely optimal for combat as you can poke from a much better distance, and the charge attack is a little more lenient in whether it hits or not. Now for a really easy puzzle that stumped me. You need to shove this stone off and break the structure below. That's the easy part. But then jumping down kills you. You're supposed to explore around and find a rope and a hook. Attach these together and you'll make yourself a safe way to slide down. I could not find the rope for about 30 minutes, leading to me walking around aimlessly. I jumped down 3 or 4 times testing to see what was up with this puzzle. Turns out I'm blind and there was an easy way to do it the entire time. This led me to an interesting pan who gave me his Riddles 3.
Alive I am not, yet still I grow. Lungs I have not, yet breathe I must. Teeth I have not, yet all I devour. What am I? Growing, roaring, devouring, fire consumes all. I have 8 to spare and am covered with hair.
Okay, I have 8 to
What
spare
am
and am covered with hair. What am I? 8 lives to spare. Yeah, it's a cat.
Indeed, the
Yeah, it's a
fur-covered
cat.
has
I almost
8
tripped
lives
myself
to
up there.
spare out of 9, if the old tales are to be believed. What weighs more, a pound of wood or a pound of ore? Of course, a pound of ore and a pound of wood weigh the same.
After receiving the pan flute, I placed it on the bridge and unlocked the next area. Here we meet the Red Widow, a boss fight which, well, I don't really know what happens because I was able to stagger her constantly and she mostly just jumped occasionally. She could send out a lightning blast, but luckily she doesn't do this often, and again the spear was just too good. The reach made it 10 times easier to dodge attacks when I needed to. In fact, this was the very first and only boss I defeated on the first try. I was pretty stoked about it, and while easier than other bosses, it was still fun. Now for a massive ziggurat expedition. The next area of the game is quite interesting. You only fight the pans still, but they mix in different variants that we've not seen yet, each more deadly than the last, but it is surprising to me how good the enemy variety was. We run into this lunar floor puzzle next. You enter the room and under your feet is one phase of the moon. Step on the moon that would follow that lunar phase or be dropped into a spawned hole. You don't die, but you definitely take a lot of damage to your health, which quickly wastes the only 3 heals that I have. It took me a minute to figure out, oh, it's based on the moon, and then it and the following room with the same puzzle were really easy. Beyond this, we have an interesting moment. I found this stone statue that was supposed to represent a pan. Well, it turns out this thing chases you down, but it can only do so when you aren't looking, similar to the Boo Ghost in Mario. I wasn't quite sure about all this yet though, so I promptly died as I think they insta-kill you. And unfortunately, I was unable to unlock the shortcut next to him, leading to a very, very long walk back down here. What followed was another big brain moment by me. You see, you need to pull a lever to open a door. However, the lever is not there. So, take the staff that the previous boss dropped and interact with it. This removes the gem on the top and you can use the bottom half as a lever. I wasted another 30 minutes on this as I could not figure this out. Oh, and don't worry, this is not the last time that I do this. With that all done, we do a little bit of grave robbing and open up the area to the Krell Guardian. By far the most epic looking boss in the game. He's a multi-faced statue with 4 arms and 4 huge swords. His spin attack is a bit odd, so it hits you even if you dodge. This led me to circling around him until he did something, and then I would attack and just jump backwards over and over. I wish I'd been doing more damage at this point, but it still felt pretty awesome. Halfway through, this monstrosity turns on the lightning, and essentially does way more damage. He has this attack where he smashes the ground over and over, hitting really far. I died around 8 times attempting to whittle him down. Eventually, I learned to be more patient in the second phase, as the slam down attack nearly kills you instantly and is impossible to get out of if you're in combat with him. By using my firepower and the excellent length of this spear, I managed to take the Goliath down. Back at the tree, he seems to be getting bigger, and he seems to have broken through this locked gate which blocked my path earlier. I'm sure that's not important. We gain access to another dragon stone, this one being dark and purple, which is very cool. Unfortunately, it says it heals you, but I literally never got it to heal me even one time, so it sounded a lot better than it actually was. We get squirted on by a pizza sauce man and then find the gem needed for this bird statue, unlocking the next area. And this area sucked. I found a new sword, which I needed to trade in my other sword for, which is a neat idea. But there are these massive Krell with shields, and they one-hit you if they charge. Also, they take 0 damage from anything but the hammer, and even then, it's not great damage. I died, granting me another trait as I reached age 50. I chose Shard Collector, which means enemies drop upgrade materials more often. At this point, I only had my spear and hammer at +2 because nothing was dropping me upgrades. And once I unlocked this trait, I upgraded 4 different weapons fully. Yes, it basically means every other enemy has a shard, and it makes a massive difference. The next puzzle had me play some music notes on an organ, kinda like this one, though it was easy to figure out. And then another 30 minutes goes by as I can't figure out how to unlock this door. Well, turns out this box I found way back earlier was just sitting in my inventory. You need to interact with it and the key pops out. Well, I wasted a lot of time, once again, forgetting about this. But we do get to enter the labyrinth. It's a separate dimension almost. The walkways move in and out in front of you as black and purple aliens teleport in to fight you. Use these circle conduits to teleport around and open up new sections of the map. While these stupid teleporting ladies are really annoying, I didn't have too much trouble here. But, of course, we run into the biggest puzzle of the game. Here we have several blocks on a tablet. You need to connect the white line on the bottom to one of the colored targets. Do so and it opens up a different path for you to walk across. I do genuinely love these kinds of puzzles, even though I found this one quite challenging. First, we have yellow, which leads us to another block we can insert on the tablet. This unlocks the next path, which was blue, since that piece is required to create the next 2 paths of the puzzle. This led to an arena of sorts. Fight your way through multiple types of the purple aliens, the big ones being particularly challenging with a very long reach of their massive swords. Behind them was another box containing a labyrinth rune. Attach it to the already existing one to get a full key. You may remember this item from Remnant From the Ashes, as if you played that game, it's the same one there. You use it to unlock labyrinth doors in that game. With the red path finally being available, we set out to solve it. This one took the longest as you make use of every single piece, meaning all of them must be in the correct location. With this done, we make our way across to meet the Labyrinth Guardian, a massive black mass of, well, I don't really know what he is. This was definitely the worst boss in the game. Apparently there's a bug which removes half of his health at the start of the fight. This turned out to be good news for me because I was not very good at dealing with his attacks. He sort of rolls at you similar to the robot in the Incredibles movie, but dodging still gets you hit. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe running could get you out of the way, but rolling surely didn't work. Because when you roll, you actually get out of his way, but his arm still hits you. Very annoying when you're in the fight. Luckily, because he only had half health, I was able to just deal a ton of damage and heal through everything. He does teleport in and out of the ground near the end, which was actually easier to deal with. So once again, the long reach of the spear allowed me to skim past this one. Probably didn't deserve the win here, all things considered, but hey, I try not to think about it too much. Now having completed all these tasks for the tree, he tells me it's finally time to take on the dragon. And with this portal he's opened up, we enter the realm of the root. It really just took us to another ward where these scientists were doing experiments and stuff. But the root are everywhere. Here we see several enemies from Remnant that were mini-bosses of a sort. Much tougher for sure. We find a small box which when opened has a glass lens. Use this lens to read runes on a wall, and input those runes on these pillars to open up a room with a gas can. Yeah, a gas can of all things. We then head back to the beginning of this area to fill up a machine with that gas, thus turning on an elevator. This leads to a poor soul who, well, touches us. And apparently it hurts a lot. Finally, we meet face to face with this dragon, a massive root monster who turns out was the tree? Not really sure if he is the tree or just another root mind, but they act sort of like a hive mind, so I think we can count them as the same. And yeah, he kicked my butt. It actually wasn't even funny. The run to this boss really sucked, at least from the direction you first find it. There's actually a better way you'll see in a bit, but regardless, this fight was not getting anywhere. You can't heal until he flies away. He only does this when his health reaches about a fourth, which is one of the sections you see on his red bar. I just could not dodge these claw attacks, and the bites are even worse. Stick too close during his face during the fire breath, and you die instantly. Man, this was not looking good. So what do I do? Well, I went and found a better weapon, that's what I did. Remember that bookcase from the very beginning where I found the key with a tiny portal? Well, turns out there's an enemy here that drops this mechanism. I walked right by it the first time around, but it is actually useful. Right before the labyrinth, there's a room with one of these toy enemies, but now it's massive. Place the mechanism on its back and wind it up, and it walks forward, opening up the door here, behind of which is the best weapon in the game, a scythe. The heavy attack does this spin that looks great, but also hits for great damage. Then you also have the fact that it's really fast. With my ability to get materials so easily, I fully upgraded it and headed back to fight the dragon once more. And well, it didn't really help me out that much. Turns out the ward you start the game in leads down to the boss fight for a much better run, but he still hits like a truck. Eventually, after aging to age 75, I finally started to get the fight down. It actually looked pretty sick. I was dodging in and out of the attacks, buffing my weapon with elemental power, and dealing damage like crazy. It was still hard, don't get me wrong, but it had finally clicked. I could read the code, ladies and gentlemen. Honestly, this fight felt really bad up until that point. It's just not very forgiving at all. But mechanically, it's sound, and you kind of like it once you get it, so you can really only blame yourself. With one last phase of his health bar, we finally go for the win. That's new. Keep moving right. Yeah, baby, come on. Why was that so clean? Why was that all of a sudden so clean, dude? Oh, man.
My link to
I was sick, boys.
had grown old and feeble.
Oh, that was sick.
Thanks to your primitive savagery, that link shall be restored.
And with that, the dragon is now defeated. We finally can celebrate. Well, no. This doctor, who I assume is the doctor who got us into all this mess, sedates you and places this contraption over your face, turning you into one of these now root dreamers. If you pay attention, this actually makes a lot of sense. So the last boss in Remnant from the Ashes is a small person with one of these contraptions on their head. But what does their arm have on it? Now remember, the tree gave our character power in this game and infected us with root on the same arm. Yep, it seems at the end of this game you become the last boss for the next game. What a total mind warp. All in all, this game was pretty great. The combat isn't amazing, but it feels well done and all the puzzles added a lot to the experience. Not a lot of build variety, but it was cool trying not to die and age myself too much. Which we did find out that aging to level 80 just makes you unable to age anymore. I guess being infected by the root does have at least one advantage. But with that, I have finally beaten Chronos Before the Ashes. Thanks to all of you who watched, and if you would, do comment down below what you thought of this game. I found it to be a pleasant surprise, and I didn't regret my time in it at all. Have a great day or night wherever you are, and I'll catch you next time.